Good evening. I'm Todd, and on my left we have Kevin Hassett, Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. On my far left, we have Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House. On my close right, I have Cenk Uygur, host and creator of the Young Turks TV show. And on my far right, we have Bernie Sanders, Senator of Vermont. Our people at NBC have assembled this panel today to discuss how much influence the president has in the economy. More specifically, we will talk about President Trump's role in the economy today. Let's talk about the condition of the economy, starting off with unemployment. So as Trump stated, unemployment is currently very low under his administration. Now, Speaker of the House Ryan, a few weeks ago, you were at a night retreat session where you argued for reform that would cut entitlements. You said you wanted to focus on getting people the skills and opportunities to get into the workforce. You and President Trump share this ideology of getting America working. What are you going to do to make this happen? And do you think that the low employment rate is a reflection of this work?
I do actually. I think in part that Trump actually took in some of the low unemployment because, obviously when Obama took office, there was a recession and there was a weak recovery, which caused a lot of the citizens to drop out of the labor force, which means they don't count on the unemployment rate, which thus lowered it. I also think Trump has a very positive approach to businesses and encouraged businesses to come back to the U.S. since most were in China. And he did this by promising significant tax breaks and rolling back restrictive regulations that Obama had placed on these companies. And then I think these companies started to hire right away as soon as they heard this, because basically consumer confidence skyrocketed as soon as he said this.
I don't know. I mean, yes, I'll give him that. Unemployment has been its lowest in years. But what President Trump failed to mention is that in his first year in office, it marked the lowest level of job creation since 2010. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 254,000 fewer jobs were created in Trump's first 11 months in office than were in the 11 months before he entered the office.
Yes, well, while you may say that, you gotta keep in mind that while 11 months before he took office, almost 4 of those are after he was elected. So you're accounting some of that. You're accounting some of the job creation technically under Obama that was actually due to Trump's election. Because as soon as Trump was elected, a lot of his tax plan was really both his tax plan and all of his economic policy really restored faith in the economic system. And a lot of companies rushed to hire and were reshoring, and essentially in anticipation of Trump, job growth was created because of Trump's election, but is being attributed to Obama. So while Trump's job growth may have been 250,000 short, he still has created 2.4 million since his election. A lot of that due to reshoring. For instance, when Obama was in office between 2013 and 2015, the average number of reshored jobs, which I'll mention, reshoring jobs is when essentially when jobs come back, American firms come back from producing in China and decide to produce in America instead. And while Obama was in office from 2013 to 2015, the average number of reshored jobs per quarter was about 17,000, then dropped to 12,000 in 2016. Under Trump, his 2016 fourth quarter was 22K, 2017 first quarter at 40,000, and his second quarter at 50,000. It's continued to grow. Trump essentially has been creating jobs in the manufacturing industry, while a lot of Obama's jobs have been in the service industry, essentially getting people back to work after frictional unemployment. Trump is essentially combating structured unemployment by his increased faith in the manufacturing industry.
But isn't it that if you get more jobs in industrial industries, right, then the progression is farming to industrial jobs and then to service jobs. Service jobs is where, first nations will basically gain more proficient and more jobs in, right?
Oh, yeah.
So wouldn't that cause, in the future, a lot of structural friction when people have to move from the industrial jobs in America to the service jobs?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not saying anything against going against service jobs. Like Obama, I'll concede he has created plenty of jobs in the service industry during his term. However, I'm just saying that what Trump's done is maintained the manufacturing industry and made sure that that's not going to leave America anytime soon. And he's trying to maintain our GDP growth and trying to keep us up with China because they've been stealing our jobs for years.
Except for the fact that from 2010 to 2014, Obama's manufacturing sector job growth was well beyond what Trump accomplished in 2017. And on top of that, how could there would be economic resurgence for a tax plan that hadn't been released until he was already elected president.
Well, his tax plan officially wasn't released until he was elected president, but in the years
Until after he was already in office, not only when he was elected president.
All right. Well, sure, Trump's policy wasn't officially released until he was in office and they put it into place. But while he was running for president, many employers knew that Trump would cut taxes on corporations, which has been cut to 21% since he's been in office, and as well as the fact that he's been very vocal in how he wants to ensure faith in the manufacturing industry while he was still running for president. So even though his official plans were not enacted until he was in office, there were pretty much everybody knew what those plans were going to entail.
Okay, moving on. Let's discuss the current stock market. Since Trump took office, the stock market has been setting record highs and has been consistently booming in the president's words. Let's quickly show one of his tweets. So is this success due to Trump's governing style or other factors outside of his control? Anyone has anything to say about that?
The economy has been growing ever since Obama came into office. He came in during a recession year that was caused by Bush-era tax and fiscal policies. But at the same time, there has been no markedly larger growth since Trump has been in office than there was during the entirety of Obama's presidency. He came into a really difficult situation and did the best he could have done.
Yeah, and well, sure. I mean, you can expect anytime there is a recession, especially as great as the one we had in 2008, you will see growth afterwards, and there has been consistent growth. I'll give that in the stock market since then. However, since Trump's taken office, there's been incredible growth rates. We've hit net record highs almost every week, every day. S&P 500 this year alone is up 6%, and that's in the first month, as opposed to an average of about 6% per year historically. So the GOP policy, I think, has led to this because it's restored faith in the economic system. People have more money to spend due to tax cuts. People are investing more, and essentially, it's booming. We have it's gone up 26.3% total since Trump took office.
Right, but at the same time, the fact that stock market is the only market that has been really shooting up at this point, correct?
Yes.
But so it's not the only metric by which you can show economic well-being for the country. So the problem is when the stock market disconnects from the reality of GDP and economic growth, you get yourself into the point where you get out of bubble, which is why we had the two worst days in the stock market history by points, not by percentage, but by points last week when the Dow Jones dropped 1,000 points and 1,100 points in 2 separate days.
And yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give that. Like points-wise, we have dropped a lot. But when you have growth so strong, we can't expect it to stagnate at that high forever. I mean, with percentage-wise, it hasn't dropped as significantly as points-wise. So it hasn't actually been as severe as we may think. But we will admit that the bubble is coming to a close.
Yeah. Right. But at the same time, is it more important that we focus on GDP or on stock market growth? Because GDP really is what shows this.
Yeah, but we're talking about stock market growth, and the main thing to notice here is this year it's very high. Even with these drops, it's still higher than most of the years past, okay? And sure, when Obama, after the recession, the stock market was booming, sure.
Right.
But Trump made it go to new heights, and I'm trying to understand, is it him who created that? Is this a significant thing that he did? Or is it just past decisions or other people's actions that made this occur in the way it did?
I do think actually it is in part Trump's fault because we'll see here. There's a quote from The Hill that says the professionals cite the White House push for lighter regulation and the recent tax bills imposed by Trump as critical to pro-growth environment. More than 90% of the group thought the tax bill would boost GDP expansion over the next 2 years. So it just shows how, since I already spoke about this, but how Trump's policies about cutting taxes and rolling back these restrictive regulations is going to help stimulate the economy.
All I have to say about this whole stock market matter is what specifically has President Trump done that no other president has done to cause this improvement in the stock market?
I mean, well, sure, a lot of that can be attributed to the so-called hype of his election. However, something like that wouldn't stay in effect unless something Trump's policy is actually making a difference. I mean, the tax cut only went into effect a few months ago, but as we've seen, it's had a favorable effect as jobs have continued to grow at staggering rates, as well as the stock markets still continue to grow until this week it's finally starting to show signs of shrinkage. But since his policies have been in effect, we've still seen this constant growth.
Right, but much of the jump in the stock market was right after he was elected, which really is more people believing in his idea less than his actual policy. And the problem is that ideas, while they're important, they don't last for years and years. So the issue that this creates is that 5 years down the road, his policy will really not do any good for the country.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, before he got elected, he was talking about all his, proposed ideas, and people listened and they believed in him. So the stock market actually, if you check it out, actually immediately started to rise. I have another quote by New York Times, which actually happens to be a more liberal website. They even actually praised Trump and said even before it became clear that the Republicans would actually pass a major tax cut, capital spending had risen significantly, climbing at an annualized rate of 6.2% during the first 3 quarters of last year. That's why.
I think it's too soon to rate how his policies will end up. I think they could be successful or unsuccessful. It's too soon, like you said, the tax reform just came out a few months ago, but it's obvious that him getting elected really boosted the stock market, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see where that plays out in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Is the low level of inflation simply a continuation of growth from the Obama administration, or is it Trump's doing? Anyone have any comments about that?
Actually, the low level of inflation hasn't continued. This year it was expected that inflation would be 1.9%, and then surprisingly it went over 2 to 2.1% in the recent report that came out this week. So he has now we originally were worried about deflation for many years after the recession, but now it's been brought to the forefront that we're now worried about inflation, which can cause a lot of damage quicker to an economy.
Yeah, but one thing about that isn't the natural inflation rate around 2% because of structural inflation, so I don't see how that would be that much. That's a pretty balanced inflation rate, I think. Right.
But it's not just looking at the inflation rate on its own, it's looking at how it's increased. Right now it's increasing at a pretty high rate. So what the worry is that it can go well over 2, 3, 4%, and at that point we have to really worry about the economy.
Yes. I mean, well, 2.1% really isn't comparable to hyperinflation at 3 or 4%. Like, the trend, sure, has been slightly upward recently, but over the course of his presidency, it actually has been relatively stable at 2%, which is our target inflation rate. So 2.1% is nothing to be afraid of. Right now, if it goes up in the future, sure, we should start to be worried, but right now I feel like the trend is not enough for us to be significantly worried. And no, although I do not believe this is a continuation from Obama. I do believe it is attributed to Trump's policy mainly because we have essentially restored faith in the economic market. Jobs have been created. The stock market has been growing up, and essentially Trump's been able to do this without disrupting inflation, which is really admirable.
I agree with Mr. Hassett. Actually, jobs have definitely been. More jobs have definitely been created. During the Obama administration, he placed a lot of regulations that restricted a lot of growth, especially on the energy industry. So once Trump came in, he rolled back those restrictions, and basically his policy have taken the economy to another level. And he's allowed more energy to be produced in the U.S. He's removed a handful of energy regulations that were instilled under Obama. So he pretty much jump-started the entire energy industry, which definitely created a lot more jobs and stimulated the economy.
One problem is this: you talk all about increasing the number of jobs, but what about the quality of them? Over the last year, after adjusting for inflation, the average worker in America saw a wage increase of, get ready for this, 4 cents an hour, or 0.17%. So that just shows how little we've actually been able to do with the minimum wage and how much workers have been making.
Well, sure. I mean, the quality of jobs and minimum wage are two separate arguments. I believe the quality of jobs, blue collar industry is essentially what Trump has been trying to bring back. The service industry's already been rebuilt since the recession, but blue collar jobs through manufacturing and reshoring of jobs essentially has been built. So quality of jobs, I'll admit it, they're not the sparkliest jobs in the tops of towers on Wall Street, but at the same time they are producing revenue streams and income streams for people in the economy who need jobs. And as well, as far as wages are concerned, with inflation rates as low as they are, I don't think that we should be too concerned about raising minimum wage. I mean, minimum wage is a completely separate discussion. I know you have your very.
You tell that to my friend who needs to send his kid to college.
I know you have
and can't afford it.
I know you have your very opinionated views on this, but I think we should not talk about minimum wage.
Okay.
So let's move on. Let's discuss the new tax plan Congress and President have worked on. And we're going to show right now two reviews the new brackets compared to the old brackets. So as you can see, the income that the brackets are cut off at is different depending on the before and after reforms, and also the percentages that they're taxed at. So President Trump says that this is a Christmas present of a reform plan because it would make everyone save a lot of money. But will this actually lead to more economic problems? Senator Sanders, income inequality is a big platform for you as a politician. What do you think about this new tax reform?
Well, first of all, with this whole new tax reform, I just want to congratulate Apple, Microsoft, General Electric, and all the huge companies that make billions of dollars, getting record-breaking profits, and seeing hundreds of billions in tax breaks. This just blows my mind. It blows my mind. This is one of the reasons why America now has more wealth and income inequality than any other major developed country on the earth. On the earth. This just saddens me. Because of this bogus tax plan, nearly 13 million Americans are expected to lose their health insurance under the tax bill due to loss of the individual mandate.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I mean, the tax cuts. Sure, they have cut a lot of tax on the corporations. It's a flat 21 now. However, you can't say that it's cutting on the rich people as opposed to so much as the corporations themselves. As far as the rich themselves are concerned, they've only got 2.6% tax break for the 1%, while the middle class has received tax breaks between brackets of 3%, 3%, even 4%. So they've been actually receiving a much stronger benefit than have the rich. The corporations themselves, I'll admit, have gotten the major benefit of the doubt here with the tax breaks of 21%. However, this is not to benefit the rich. This is to benefit the American people. With these companies getting these tax breaks, they have more incentive to stay in the U.S., they have more incentive to hire, and they have more money to hire. So costs go down, and essentially employment rises.
Actually,
So you're saying-
actually, the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has found that 83% of the benefits of the tax bill will enrich the top 1% of Americans. So I don't think that it's fair to say that this will not explicitly affect the 1% because it does.
Well, sure, maybe. I'm not saying it doesn't affect the 1%. I'm just saying that the majority of this has been done to stimulate the economy for the middle class and raise their incomes.
Except for the fact that in 8 years, the tax rate for the middle class is going to hike up. It was intentionally structured by the GOP to not look bad on them, because they expect it to be a swing back left. So in 8 years, when the swing back left happens, it's going to look bad on the Democrats when the taxes all of a sudden hike for the middle class, while at the same time they won't hike for the top percent. And for the top quartile of the income tax bracket, the cut for the minimum cut in taxes is more than a minimum wage worker can make before taxes over a year. So that is not an insubstantial amount of money.
And I also have these two graphs that show the plan in 2019 and 2027, how it progresses and how the income after tax will increase. And in both these graphs, you can see that for the bottom 20%, their income only rises by 0.3% by 2019. Top 0.1% is 1.2, and it really helps the higher earners in this case. And if you even look even further to 2027, the bottom 20% are actually losing their income. They're actually having a 0.1% increase in taxes and decrease in income after tax. And the 0.1% get a 2% increase in their income. So it's helping them out a lot more than the low earners. So what do you have to say about
Well
that?
said.
Well, looking at the graphs, we can see how the middle class's percent changes are vastly larger than the top 1% and the bottom 20%. But then when we look at the chart for the 2027 percent changes, we can, these numbers, although they have a base, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily accurate because in the future there's so many things that can influence these numbers. There's
plenty of other policies that can come into effect, and obviously president changes can also affect these numbers as well.
But at the same time, in government, you're supposed to be planning for the future. You're not supposed to be looking at this next year only. You're supposed to be looking at what happens the next 10 years. So if this is predicting that the next 10 years are going to be a shit show for the middle-income Americans, why would this help the U.S. in the long run?
Well, in the long run, this is not we. This
Well,
is
the long run's all that's important in keeping the country prosperous. It's not just about 1 year of amazing returns.
well, of course, but as you said, the Dems are going to flip within like it's most likely going to flip to a Democratic presidency within at least 1 or 2 terms, or at most 1 or 2 terms. And I feel that like although this may sound like we're trying to shift essentially blame for downturn onto the Democratic Party, I feel that like with so much change, these numbers will not stay to effect. We're not specifically doing this with this model knowing that this is going to happen, because we do not feel that this will happen.
Right, but tax changes don't happen major tax plan changes don't happen that often. It's been about every 30 years, plus or minus 5 years, that there's been a major tax plan change. So we're in this for the long haul, and the problem is it looks like the long haul is going to screw us.
I mean, with the fluctuation that we've seen so far, like we've had so much unpredictable change. I strongly do not feel that this will change.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. Thanks for watching. This is NBC. This is the panel. Thanks for coming over, guys. This was a nice conversation, and I hope that conversations like these can lead to solutions in the future.
I doubt it.
It was a
This is
pleasure having you.
treasonous. Treason.